The first gunshot echoed through the abandoned shipyard before anyone realized the woman in the white evening dress was the one pulling the trigger. 7 armed men had surrounded her beneath rusting cargo cranes, their rifles pointed toward the lone figure standing in the rain. To them, she looked like an easy hostage, a discarded Mafia wife abandoned by the empire that had once feared her husband's name. The first man collapsed before he could finish raising his weapon. The second lost his balance after a knife flashed through the darkness and buried itself in his shoulder. The third charged recklessly. She broke his wrist with frightening precision before using his own pistol against the fourth attacker. Everything happened in seconds. Rain washed blood across the cracked concrete while distant thunder swallowed the screams. Hidden hundreds of feet away, inside the tinted windows of an armored SUV, the most feared crime boss in Europe stared without blinking. Damien Vittori. The man newspapers called the Ghost King. The man rival cartels whispered about with terror. The man who had signed divorce papers only 6 weeks earlier. His expression never changed. But for the first time in years, his heartbeat did. His ex-wife wasn't supposed to know how to fight. She wasn't supposed to survive. She definitely wasn't supposed to dismantle an elite assassination squad alone. The bodyguards inside the SUV waited for orders. None came. Damien simply watched. The woman he had spent 2 years treating like a political obligation moved with terrifying confidence, flowing between bullets as though she'd rehearsed this moment her entire life. 5 attackers were already down. The 6th reached for a hidden blade. She caught his wrist. A sharp twist. A sickening crack. Another body hit the wet ground. Only one man remained. He backed away slowly, panic replacing confidence as he realized every member of his squad had failed. The woman lowered her weapon. For a heartbeat, it looked as if she might spare him. Instead, she stepped forward. Not with rage. Not with revenge. With absolute certainty. The final shot shattered the silence. 7 bodies. 1 survivor. The rain continued falling as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Inside the SUV, Damien finally spoke. Who trained her? No one answered. Because no one knew. For 2 years, Isabella Moretti had played the perfect Mafia wife. Quiet. Elegant. Invisible. She attended charity galas, smiled during political dinners, and stood beside one of the world's deadliest men without ever asking questions. She appeared fragile enough to break beneath the weight of the empire. Apparently, every single person had been wrong. Damien replayed every memory. Every dinner she'd quietly prepared after midnight. Every bruise he'd assumed came from clumsiness. Every scar he'd never bothered to ask about. Every moment she'd lowered her eyes whenever his captains entered the room. Had she been pretending? Or had he simply never looked closely enough? The realization settled over him like ice. He knew almost nothing about the woman he'd married. A helicopter's rotors thundered overhead. Black vehicles poured into the shipyard. Not Damien's soldiers. Someone else's. The Raven Syndicate. Their insignia appeared on every armored truck. Dozens of heavily armed operatives surrounded Isabella. Unlike the 7 assassins, these soldiers kept their weapons lowered. Their leader stepped forward. An older man with silver hair. He bowed. Actually bowed. To Damien's former wife. Every soldier followed. An entire criminal army bent its knees before the woman Damien had once dismissed as weak. His closest advisor felt the blood drain from his face. Boss. Damien didn't answer. The old man handed Isabella a black case. She opened it. Inside rested a signet ring marked with an ancient raven crest, a symbol that had disappeared from the underworld nearly 20 years earlier. Every Mafia family believed the Raven Syndicate's true heir had died as a child. Apparently, she hadn't. Isabella slipped the ring onto her finger without hesitation. The soldiers immediately formed protective ranks around her. Not because she needed protection. Because she was their leader. Damien's carefully constructed understanding of reality cracked apart. The marriage. The divorce. The years of silence. None of it made sense anymore. Then Isabella slowly turned her head. Across the rain-soaked shipyard, her eyes met Damien's through the SUV windshield. There was no hatred, no love, no regret, only disappointment. A look infinitely sharper than any bullet. Then she disappeared into the waiting convoy. The vehicles vanished into the storm before Damien's men even remembered to move. Hours later, investigators would report that 7 unidentified mercenaries had been executed with military precision. No witnesses, no evidence, no explanation. But Damien knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had never truly known the woman he had married. And now she belonged to an empire powerful enough to make even his own organization hesitate. As dawn broke over the city, reports began arriving from every corner of the criminal underworld. The Raven Syndicate had returned. And at its center stood the woman Damien had cast aside. Only one question remained. Why had the most dangerous woman in the underworld agreed to become the unloved wife of the coldest Mafia boss in the first place? Damien Moretti did not sleep. Before sunrise, every intelligence network under his control was activated. Surveillance teams were dispatched across 3 countries. Financial analysts traced shell companies. Hackers penetrated encrypted databases. Veteran spies searched through decades-old archives that had survived cartel wars and government raids. By noon, every report reached the same impossible conclusion. There was no record explaining how Isabella Moretti had become the heir of the Raven Syndicate. It was as if she had appeared from nowhere. For the first time since inheriting the Moretti empire, Damien faced an opponent whose past could not be purchased, tortured, or uncovered. That uncertainty frightened everyone except him. It fascinated him. Meanwhile, news of the shipyard massacre spread through the underworld like wildfire. Crime families who had mocked Isabella as the quiet, discarded wife suddenly erased every insult from their records. Alliances shifted overnight. Neutral organizations declared emergency meetings. The return of the Raven Syndicate threatened the balance of power that had existed for nearly 20 years. Fear was replacing loyalty. Greed was replacing fear. And someone intended to profit from the chaos. Within 48 hours, shipments belonging to the Moretti family disappeared from 3 ports. 2 warehouses exploded before sunrise. One of Damien's trusted accountants vanished without leaving a trace. Every attack was precise enough to weaken the empire without provoking immediate retaliation. Someone was testing him. The attacks carried no signature, no demands, no messages, only silence. His advisors insisted the Raven Syndicate had declared war. Damien wasn't convinced. The attacks lacked Isabella's precision. She eliminated threats cleanly. This felt messy, deliberately emotional. Someone wanted him angry. Across the city, Isabella stood inside the Raven Syndicate's headquarters, an abandoned cathedral converted into an operations center decades earlier. Massive digital maps covered ancient stone walls while elite operatives waited for her decisions. The silver-haired man who had bowed before her at the shipyard placed fresh intelligence reports onto the table. The Moretti Empire believes we're responsible. She barely looked at the documents. They're supposed to. The attacks continue. I know. You could stop them. Not yet. The older man studied her carefully. You still care whether Damien survives. For the first time, her composure cracked. Only slightly. Only long enough for painful memories to return. She remembered standing alone in the enormous Moretti mansion while Damien buried himself in endless meetings. She remembered anniversaries forgotten because another gang war demanded his attention. She remembered hearing whispers that she was nothing more than a political marriage arranged to secure temporary peace. He had never struck her. He had never screamed at her. His cruelty had been colder. Indifference. He never asked who she had been before becoming his wife. Never questioned the scars she hid beneath elegant dresses. Never wondered why nightmares woke her before dawn. Eventually, silence became easier than hope. Yet when assassins surrounded her at the shipyard, part of her had unconsciously searched for his arrival. That realization angered her more than anything Damien had ever done. Before she could bury the thought, alarms echoed through the cathedral. Multiple explosions shook the ancient walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The outer security gates had been breached. Black armored vehicles crashed through reinforced barriers while masked soldiers flooded the courtyard with military precision. Not Moretti soldiers. Not government forces. Their insignia showed a crimson serpent wrapped around a crown. The Black Viper Consortium. A ruthless coalition that had remained hidden while Europe's strongest syndicates exhausted themselves through years of conflict. Now they were emerging. Exactly when both empires were vulnerable. Missiles struck communication towers. Snipers occupied nearby rooftops. The attack had been planned for months. Isabella didn't hesitate. Instead of retreating into underground bunkers, she walked directly toward the main entrance. Elite Raven operatives rushed to protect her. She ordered them aside. Outside, chaos consumed the cathedral grounds. Gunfire echoed across marble courtyards while burning vehicles illuminated the afternoon sky. Black Viper commandos advanced behind armored shields, expecting another frightened crime family to collapse beneath overwhelming force. Instead, they encountered Isabella. She moved with calm precision. Every shot counted. Every movement forced enemies into predictable positions. She used shattered statues, burning vehicles, and collapsing stone pillars as weapons as much as cover. Her battlefield awareness transformed numerical disadvantage into tactical superiority. Within minutes, the assault slowed. Not because the attackers lacked courage. Because their commanders kept disappearing. One after another. Shot through windows. Pulled into blind corners. Neutralized before issuing another order. High above the battlefield, hidden drones transmitted everything live. One private viewer watched every second. Damien. Against every recommendation from his advisors, he had secretly deployed surveillance near Raven territory after the shipyard incident. Now he witnessed Isabella leading an entire defense with astonishing discipline. No panic. No wasted ammunition. No emotional decisions. She fought exactly as he did. Only better. His generals exchanged uneasy glances. If Black Viper destroys Raven today, one captain said carefully, our greatest rival disappears. Damien continued watching the screen. Another explosion erupted. A collapsing bell tower crushed several attackers. Then something unexpected happened. A sniper positioned nearly a mile away found Isabella. The laser sight settled over her chest. Damien noticed it before anyone else. Without thinking, he issued an order. Intercept. His own hidden strike team, originally sent only to observe, immediately opened fire on the sniper position. The assassin fell before pulling the trigger. Every commander inside the operations room stared at Damien in disbelief. He had just saved the woman he supposedly hated. Before anyone could question him, new intelligence flooded every monitor. Black Viper forces were simultaneously attacking Moretti territory on the opposite side of the city. The shipyard. The ports. The cathedral. Everything had been coordinated. Neither Damien nor Isabella had been the true target. They had both been manipulated into blaming each other while a third empire quietly positioned itself to conquer both. Realizing the deception at the same moment, Isabella looked toward the skyline. Across the city, Damien stood before the massive windows of his headquarters. Miles separated them. Yet each understood the same truth. Their divorce had never been the end of the story. It had been the opening move in someone else's game. Minutes later, encrypted messages reached both leaders simultaneously. The sender remained anonymous. The message contained only one sentence. One empire will burn tonight. Choose whether it is yours or each other's. Neither of them knew that the greatest betrayal was still waiting inside their own inner circles, where someone they had each trusted for years had already sold both empires to the Black Viper Consortium. The anonymous message reached both empires only minutes before sunset. Neither Damien Moretti nor Isabella hesitated. Instead of marching against each other, they gave the same unexpected order. Protect civilians. Secure the cities. Ignore old grudges. That single decision shattered the Black Viper Consortium strategy. Their entire plan had relied on two legendary crime empires destroying one another while they claimed the remains. Instead, they faced united resistance. Across the city, Explosions lit the skyline as Black Viper strike teams launched their final offensive. Bridges were mined. Convoys ambushed. Safe houses burned. Every attack was designed to create panic before midnight. But panic never came. The Raven Syndicate fought with ruthless precision. The Moretti Empire answered with overwhelming force. For the first time in years, two rival armies moved as one. The streets became a battlefield unlike anything the underworld had witnessed in decades. Damien led from the front, refusing the safety of armored command vehicles. Every decision he made carried a new weight. He was no longer fighting to protect only his empire. He was fighting to stop the mistake that had allowed another enemy to manipulate them both. Across another district, Isabella dismantled Black Viper command centers one by one. She anticipated every ambush, redirected every assault, and trapped enemy commanders inside their own escape routes. The organization that had believed it could conquer Europe in a single night slowly realized it had underestimated the two people it had worked so hard to divide. Then came the final betrayal. Inside the Moretti headquarters, Damien's oldest advisor calmly disabled the building's security systems. He had served Damien's father. He had attended Damien's wedding. He had stood beside the Empire for over 20 years. Now he opened the gates himself. Black Viper soldiers flooded into the compound. Documents proving decades of corruption disappeared into flames. Vaults were emptied. Explosives were armed beneath the foundations. The advisor smiled as he contacted Black Viper's leader. "The Ghost King dies tonight." He never finished the sentence. A single blade pierced his shoulder. He turned in disbelief. Isabella stood behind him. She had anticipated the betrayal long before the attack began. The mysterious financial transfers, the perfectly timed ambushes, and the missing intelligence reports had pointed towards someone close enough to manipulate both sides. Justice arrived quietly. The advisor confessed everything before federal authorities and international investigators who had secretly been tracking Black Viper's global operations closed in. His testimony exposed money laundering networks, corrupt officials, and the hidden leadership that had fueled years of violence. At the same time, Damien confronted Black Viper's commander inside the burning headquarters. The battle was brutal. No audience. No speeches. Only two men fighting for the future of everything they controlled. Steel clashed against steel while flames consumed the walls around them. Damien carried the scars of years spent believing power alone could protect the people around him. His opponent fought only for domination. That difference decided the outcome. With one final strike, Damien disarmed him. Sirens echoed through the city. Police units, special forces, and international agencies surrounded the compound. Black Viper's remaining commanders surrendered or fled into the night. Their empire collapsed before dawn. Silence settled over the ruined headquarters. Smoke drifted through broken windows as the first rays of sunlight reached the battlefield. Damien found Isabella standing alone on the rooftop, overlooking a city that had survived another night of bloodshed. Neither spoke immediately. Words were no longer enough. He finally understood what he had failed to see throughout their marriage. Hatred had never defined their relationship. Neglect had. He had mistaken emotional distance for strength, believing that protecting his empire required sacrificing every personal connection. Instead, it had nearly cost him the one person capable of standing beside him as an equal. Isabella had changed as well. For years she had hidden behind silence, believing that carrying every burden alone was the only path to survival. The woman who once accepted being overlooked had become a leader whose courage inspired absolute loyalty. She no longer needed anyone's approval, least of all Damien's. He offered neither excuses nor promises he could not keep. Only honesty. "If there's any future," he admitted quietly, "it begins with respect." She studied him for a long moment. The cold ruler who once viewed every relationship as a transaction was gone. In his place stood a man who finally understood that trust could not be commanded by fear. It had to be earned. She gave the smallest nod. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Simply the chance for both of them to begin again without lies between them. Months later, the criminal landscape looked completely different. The Black Viper Consortium existed only in sealed case files and abandoned safe houses. The Moretti Empire abandoned many of its most violent operations, while the Raven Syndicate focused on dismantling trafficking networks that had flourished during years of gang warfare. The fragile peace they forged remained imperfect, but the endless cycle of revenge had finally been broken. Legends spread through the underworld about the night an unloved wife defeated 7 assassins, exposed a conspiracy, and helped destroy the most dangerous syndicate in Europe. Some said she saved the Ghost King. Others insisted she never needed saving herself. Only Damien knew the truth. The greatest battle Isabella had won was not against 7 armed men. It was against every person, including him, who had underestimated her. And in the underworld, there was one lesson no one would ever forget again. The most dangerous person in the room is often the one everyone stopped noticing.